It was a damp spring morning in rural Nova Scotia, the kind of morning when the clouds hang low over the spruce trees and the earth smells of moss and thawing soil. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan had already padded into her parents' bedroom 3 times, pink sweater sleeves flopping past her hands, asking for another cartoon. In the kitchen, her 4-year-old brother Jack banged a plastic truck along the table leg, making engine noises that mingled with the rattle of rain on the roof. Their baby sister Meadow stirred in her crib, a soft coo rising above the hum of a space heater. For a family tucked away on Gairloch Road, this was the definition of ordinary. At 9:47 a.m., the chatter stopped. No footsteps, no toy engines, no little voice calling Mom. Mother Malaya Brooks Murray felt the hush first. She nudged her partner, 32-year-old Daniel Martell, and listened. Nothing. The sliding door at the back of the house could open almost soundlessly once the latch was down, a fact every adult in the home knew too well. In an instant, both parents were on their feet, scanning the mudroom, the yard, the tree line beyond the broken cedar fence. The dinosaur boots Jack loved were gone. So was Lily's white backpack. The house sits just outside Lansdowne, a speck of a community in Pictou County with a population under 500. Thick forest presses in on all sides, broken only by old logging tracks and the ochre ribbon of the East River. The nearest neighbor is Daniel's mother, Karen, living in a weather-beaten camper at the edge of the lot. Beyond that, there is only ragged wilderness. If 2 small children slipped into those woods unsupervised, the possibilities were endless and frighteningly few. Malaya's fingers shook as she dialed 911. She told the dispatcher Lily was wearing everything pink and might be carrying a backpack. Jack had blue dinosaur boots and a navy hoodie. "They never wander," she said. "We're always outside with them." The call was logged at exactly 10 a.m. on Friday, the 2nd of May, 2025. Within 2 hours, Royal Canadian Mounted Police cruisers were parked nose to tail along Gairloch Road. Ground search teams fanned out with dogs. Drone pilots launched quadcopters above the canopy. A vulnerable missing person alert flashed across every phone in Pictou County. The working theory was that Lily and Jack had simply wandered off. There was no evidence of abduction, investigators repeated to cameras. Yet searchers quickly learned the terrain had teeth. Steep banks fell into swampy hollows. Brambles tore at trouser legs. Temperatures dipped towards single digits after dusk. Volunteers refused to quit, trudging through the night, calling Lily, pause, Jack, pause, listening for any reply. Nothing came back but wind. In those first 24 hours, Father Cody Sullivan, estranged from the family and living 3 hours away, drove to the command post and offered DNA for scent. Tracking Daniel, visibly shaken, handed over his phone and asked investigators for a lie detector test on the spot. Malia gave a tearful interview to local television, her voice catching as she described Lily's unfailing friendliness. "They'll talk your ear off in the grocery store." She insisted the children would never venture into the woods alone. By Sunday morning, the manpower had doubled. More than 160 volunteers, plus RCMP helicopters and an infrared airplane. Still nothing. Staff Sergeant Curtis McKinnon told reporters, "We're keeping all avenues open." Yet privately, the odds were turning grim. Rain had fallen. The ponds were swollen. Foxes and coyotes roamed the brush. If the children were alive, they would be cold, terrified, and difficult to hear above the streams. Rumors began their own march. Locals whispered that the couple's relationship had been strained, that Children's Protective Services had visited before. Others pointed to Daniel's past, a minor assault charge at 19, and wondered aloud. During a recorded interview, days later, Daniel admitted, "I thought the kids opened the door and just vanished. I grabbed the car and tore down every dirt road." Investigators asked where the family router logs placed his phone that morning. They took the device for analysis. Meanwhile, the community that once felt like a cousin-filled safe haven began to fracture. Volunteers were ordered to stand down to preserve safety. Tics and exhaustion were taking a toll. Online forums flared with accusations. One post claimed cadaver dogs had not been deployed, a fact police later confirmed, fueling further outrage. In the midst of it all, Meadow, barely 16 months old, was placed in temporary care to keep a tight leash on everything, as Daniel put it. By the end of the first week, the search had become an investigation. More than 300 tips flooded in. 50 witnesses were interviewed. The Nova Scotia government announced a $150,000 reward for information. Lilly and Jack's faces appeared on every broadcast across the Maritimes, their smiles staring out from missing child posters taped to gas station doors and grocery store windows. Still, one detail lingered like a splinter. May 1st, not May 2nd, was the last day anyone outside the immediate family reported seeing the children alive. Surveillance footage from a new Glasgow convenience store allegedly showed Lily in her pink jacket, Jack by her side. What happened in the 18 hours between that trip and the parents' frantic phone call? In that silence lay either hope or horror. As dusk fell over Lansdowne on day 7, porch lights blinked on in silent vigil, each bulb a tiny promise. Wherever Lily and Jack were, someone was still waiting. Part 1 ends here, with a community searching the darkest corners of the forest and of their own doubts, while 2 small voices remain unheard. In Part 2, we narrow the timeline further and examine the first cracks in the story told by the adults closest to Lily and Jack. Detectives always say the devil hides in the details, so the second week became a microscopic search for minutes and megabytes. RCMP Tech Forensics pulled the Sullivan home router logs and saw something odd. At 6:11 a.m. on Friday, May 2nd, a smart display in the kitchen streamed nursery songs for exactly 13 minutes, long after Daniel claimed the family was still asleep. 2 minutes after the music stopped, a door sensor pinged the network, recording an open-close cycle to the back deck. Then the house went electronically silent until 9:48 a.m., when both parents dialed emergency services. The gap felt too neat, too orchestrated, raising a question investigators could not shake. Who was awake with the children before dawn? Daniel's first formal statement had placed him in bed until Malahia roused him near 10, yet phone metadata told another story. His handset's GPS showed a 32-minute excursion between 7:02 a.m. and 7:34 a.m., drifting down a logging spur that ended at the East River. When confronted, he said he must have driven around looking, insisting panic had scrambled his memory. Officers noted fresh mud on his pickup's wheel wells and seized the floor mats for lab testing. Meanwhile, analysts pored over Malahia's social media. On April 30th, she posted a sunset photo captioned, "Last light of April. New month, new start." Beneath it, friends noticed a cryptic reply from her half-sister Haley. "You need to tell them the truth while you still can." When interviewed, Haley described mounting tension inside the house, financial strain, unpaid power bills, threats of eviction. She claimed Daniel kept his temper with the public, but erupted behind closed doors, punching doors, and once shattering a baby gate. Child welfare staff had scheduled a follow-up visit for May 6th. The children vanished 4 days earlier. Investigators also revisited the convenience store footage from May 1st. In the clip, Lily stands beside her mother at the counter, clutching a chocolate milk. Jack is visible only in reflection, tugging at Daniel's sleeve near the magazine rack. A timestamp shows 5:42 p.m. After paying, the trio step outside, but the camera angle never captures them getting into a vehicle. Detectives canvassed adjacent businesses and found no trace of the family between 5:45 and 6:15. One cashier recalled seeing Daniel pacing by the payphone, arguing under his breath. Another customer remembered a toddler crying, then silence. Back at Gairloch Road, search dogs were redeployed with scent articles gathered from the children's pillowcases. This time, handlers started on the gravel shoulder instead of the lawn. Both dogs followed the same route. Across the driveway, over a culvert, and east along the tree line, toward Daniel's mother's camper. The scent terminated at the edge of a shallow fire pit behind the trailer. Inside the ash pile, officers found charred fragments of nylon fabric, size 5 cartoon socks, and what looked like singed plastic beads from a child's bracelet. Karen Martell, Daniel's mother, swore the fire had burned for days before the disappearance and claimed the debris was old garbage. Forensics bagged the remains anyway. Public sympathy began to erode. Rumors spread that a GoFundMe set up by a family friend had surpassed $40,000. Screenshots showed 2 cash withdrawals totaling $8,000 within the first week. Malahia said the money paid for search team refreshments and hotel rooms for out-of-town relatives. Critics online called it exploitation. Daniel deactivated his Facebook, posting a final status, "Judge us when you've lost your babies." The comment thread exploded, then vanished. On May 12th, a break seemed imminent. A hiker reported children's laughter near an abandoned quarry 12 kilometers south of Lansdowne. Tactical officers swarmed the site only to find 2 cousins skipping rocks, unrelated to the case. The false alarm, broadcast live by Regional News, deepened fatigue among volunteers. RCMP scaled the ground search to secondary sweeps, citing resource limits. Many locals interpreted the shift as surrender. Behind the scenes, investigators convened a multidisciplinary panel. Behavioral analysts, medical examiners, digital evidence gurus. Their consensus? Accidental wilderness loss was now statistically unlikely. Attention swung inward, toward the adults. Lab tests returned on the truck's floor mats, revealing traces of diluted bleach and microscopic human epithelial cells consistent with juveniles. The sample wasn't robust enough for conclusive DNA profiling, but it nudged the needle toward foul play. Daniel agreed to a polygraph on May 15th. Results were never released, but insiders leaked that he showed significant physiological response when asked whether he'd witnessed the children alive after sunrise. The following day, RCMP executed a sealed warrant on the Sullivan house. They removed a mattress, a section of baseboard from the bathroom, and the entire back door frame. Blue Star reagent reportedly fluoresced on the linoleum near the washer, later attributed by Daniel to a rabbit skin I was tanning. Samples went to the lab. The couple relocated to separate accommodations. That weekend, Child Protective Services held a closed hearing and placed Baby Meadow with Daniel's sister in New Brunswick. For Malahia, it was a shattering blow. She recorded a midnight live stream, mascara streaking down her cheeks, pleading for Meadow's return and swearing she never laid a hand on Lilly or Jack. Viewers saw Daniel standing off camera, arms folded, eyes hard. Comments filled with heart emojis and broken heart emojis in equal measure. Pressure cooked the household history and more cracks appeared. A neighbor recalled a loud altercation on April 26th, the couple yelling about another CPS visit. A delivery driver reported seeing Daniel haul 3 large garbage bags to the fire pit that same afternoon. Receipts showed purchases of heavy-duty contractor bags, charcoal briquettes, and lighter fluid 2 hours earlier at a hardware store in New Glasgow. Yet the most haunting detail emerged from a child safety app installed on Lily's old tablet, which synced location history to cloud storage. Tech specialists recovered pings from 4:43 a.m. to 5:12 a.m. on May 2nd, tracing a slow 30-meter path from the living room couch to the back deck, then out of range, exactly the window when the nursery songs played. It suggested at least one child was awake and moving. tablet in hand, at dawn. As May turned to June, the forest grew thick with new leaves, hiding secrets beneath ferns and fallen spruce. Candlelight vigils flickered out one by one, posters curled on telephone poles. But inside the RCMP incident room, a web of timelines, GPS dots, and witness statements was tightening. The question was no longer whether the children had left the property, but whether they had ever truly left the house alive. Part 2 closes with suspicion homing in on the adults' shifting stories and a forensic trail that now pointed not toward the endless woods, but back under the very roof that once sheltered Lilly and Jack. Part 3 will unravel the family dynamics, the social service files, and the sudden disappearance of a crucial witness who claimed she saw everything. 3 weeks after Lilly and Jack vanished, Pictou County wore its grief like a damp blanket, heavy, unavoidable, and beginning to smell of anger. Flyers had faded, their corners curled by salt air drifting up from the Northumberland Strait, yet the children's faces still stared from every bulletin board. Lily's crooked bangs, Jack's gap-toothed grin. Residents, once united in search parties, now eyed one another with quiet suspicion. At Friday's farmers' market, elderberries and gossip flowed in equal measure. People whispered that police had narrowed the circle to the very people who first dialed 911. Behind closed doors, investigators dug into the family's social service history. Files showed that on April 12th, a child protection worker noted chronic clutter, intermittent food insecurity, and unmanaged conflict between caregivers. The report outlined a follow-up visit scheduled for May 6th, 4 days after the disappearance. A margin note read, "Mother appears overwhelmed, partner defensive, children present as lightly supervised." Another entry, dated March, described Daniel answering the door shirtless, eyes glassy, clutching a vape pen that smelled of hash oil. He allegedly told the worker, "We got it under control." CPS loves wasting time. Those files, once sealed, now guided detectives through a minefield of potential motive. Texts subpoenaed from Daniel's phone painted an equally jagged portrait. In a week-long stretch ending April 28th, he messaged a friend about money woes. Power will be cut. Need like 200 ASAP. Hours later he wrote, "Kids driving me mental. Might send them to my mom for a bit." Another text, 2 days before the children vanished, read simply, "CPS coming again Tuesday. FML." Meanwhile, browser history showed late-night searches for "how long to boil bleach, smell out of car floor," and Nova Scotia river depth spring runoff. But what truly shifted the investigation was the testimony of 27-year-old Shannon McInnes, a part-time mail carrier who lived in the last bungalow before Gairloch Road bends toward the river. On May 14th, she phoned the RCMP task force and said she had hesitated to speak earlier out of fear. Now she was ready. At 6:30 a.m. on May 2nd, she claimed she saw Daniel's pickup idling at the fire pit behind his mother's camper. Its tailgate sat open. Something long and wrapped in a blue tarp lay across it. Shannon thought it odd because Daniel usually kept his truck in front of the house. She also swore she saw the outline of what looked like a child's backpack, white with purple straps, propped against the passenger seat. She'd noticed it because Lily always wore that backpack to town. Investigators took her statement, recorded it, and scheduled a formal re-interview for May 18th. 2 days before that follow-up, Shannon vanished. She failed to clock in for her postal route. Calls went to voicemail. Co-workers found her small sedan parked at a Tim Hortons 30 kilometers away, keys still in the ignition, half-finished coffee in the cup holder. Surveillance cameras showed Shannon entering the cafe at 7:19 a.m., buying a breakfast sandwich and walking toward the exit, then nothing. She never reached her car. Detectives would later discover a side door left unlatched, leading to a delivery alley with no camera coverage. The timing ignited speculation. Online forums exploded with theories that someone silenced the one witness willing to place Daniel at the fire pit. Police, unusually tight-lipped, confirmed only that Shannon was now considered a missing person. Inside the task force war room, red yarn now connected not only Lilly and Jack, but also Shannon, to Daniel's mother's camper, the truck, and a growing stack of forensic evidence. That evidence included the lab report on the charred debris from the fire pit. Analysts recovered melted fragments of low-temperature plastic consistent with the midsole of a child's boot, plus fibers matching polyester fleece in pastel pink. Trace DNA could not be produced. It had burned too hot, but the material composition exactly matched the dinosaur boots and pink sweater described in the missing person alert. Investigators confronted Daniel with the findings during a second marathon interview. According to a leak, he responded by shaking his head, repeating, "They were never in that fire." When asked why the debris matched his stepchildren's clothing, he said, "Lots of kids wear pink fleece and dinosaur boots. Half this county shops at the same thrift store." Pressure mounted. A second polygraph was scheduled, then abruptly canceled after Daniel retained a new lawyer who issued a public statement. Mr. Martel is a victim of baseless character assassination. He cooperated fully until the investigation turned into a witch hunt. The lawyer claimed police were ignoring alternate leads, such as the possibility of abduction by strangers or even by Daniel's estranged half-brother, who had visited in mid-April. Detectives quietly verified the half-brother's alibi. He was on shift in Alberta's oil sands, 3,000 kilometers away. While legal lines hardened, a different front emerged: financial forensics. The GoFundMe withdrawals flagged earlier had been traced to an ATM in neighboring Antigonish. Security footage showed Malaya entering the bank lobby, withdrawing $4,000 in 2 transactions, stuffing the cash into a diaper bag, then leaving alone. She later claimed the money paid for motel rooms for volunteer searchers. Bank statements told a different story. Over $2,600 went toward overdue truck payments. Another $800 funded a weekend Airbnb near Peggy's Cove, booked under Daniel's name for April 20th to 22nd. Detectives wondered aloud why parents of 2 young kids would splurge on a seaside getaway in the midst of CPS scrutiny. Inside police interviews, cracks between the couple widened. Malahia admitted Daniel sometimes lost it when the kids fought over toys, once grabbing Jack too hard. She insisted he never harmed Lily, at least not that I saw, but disclosed that Daniel had relapsed into meth use in March. Daniel, in turn, accused Malahia of frequenting online poker rooms at night, leaving him to settle the kids. He suggested she might have dozed off that morning and let them slip out. Investigators pulled login records. Malaya had indeed played an online tournament until 3:12 a.m. on May 2nd. Digital sleep tracking on her smartwatch showed she fell asleep at 3:34 a.m. and woke at 9:41, 7 minutes before the 911 call, contradicting her claim she rose earlier to search. In a follow-up interview, she said perhaps the watch missynced. Meanwhile, cadaver dogs were finally deployed inside the Sullivan mobile home. They alerted twice, once at the bathroom threshold and again at the washing machine's rubber seal. Luminol testing revealed faint circular spatter on the underside of the washer lid, too degraded for typing, but exhibiting characteristics of high-velocity impact, not common laundry residue. Forensics also located a small child's tooth fragment inside the machine's drain trap, jammed among lint and hair ties. Dental records later confirmed it matched Lily's right lateral incisor, recently wiggly, according to her kindergarten teacher. Confronted with this evidence, Daniel's lawyer said, "No comment," while Malahia collapsed in sobs, whispering, "This can't be real." Community sentiment flipped from sorrow to fury. A candlelight vigil turned tense when protesters shouted, "Where are the kids?" as the couple tried to speak. RCMP officers ushered them away. That night, Daniel posted on a newly created social account, "We loved our kids. Hate won't bring them back." The account was deactivated within hours. Through June, investigators compiled a timeline so detailed it bordered on obsessive. Utility meter readings, cloud storage pings, dash cam hits from passing trucks. One pattern emerged. Daniel's pickup was absent from the property on May 2nd, long enough to reach the East River and return before 8 a.m. Thermal imaging data from a forestry drone, archived inadvertently by a university research project, showed a heat signature matching a vehicle paused near a steep embankment at 7:19 a.m., exactly when Daniel's phone lost signal. Search divers descended into the river's tannin-dark water on June 22nd. They found nothing. No backpack, no boots, no tarp. Yet the very act of dragging the river signaled something had changed. Investigators now believed the children's bodies had been transported and concealed, not lost in the woods. By early July, Crown prosecutors huddled with RCMP brass. They weighed circumstantial evidence, digital trails, blood trace, financial motive, CPS pressure, against the absence of bodies. The disappearance of witness Shannon McInnes complicated matters, hinting at potential witness tampering or worse. But when the tooth fragment came back as a DNA match to Lilly, the pendulum tipped. In Canada, homicide charges can proceed without recovered remains if prosecutors show, beyond reasonable doubt, that the victims are deceased and the accused caused their deaths. Part 3 ends with an irrevocable shift. Investigators preparing arrest warrants, a community waiting for either justice or another heartbreak, and two parents whose stories have diverged so far they can no longer protect each other or themselves. Part 4 will chronicle the arrests, the courtroom drama, and the lingering mystery of Shannon's disappearance, closing the circle on a case that has already torn 3 families apart. Just after sunrise on July 8th, unmarked cruisers eased up Gairloch Road, headlights off, gravel crunching in slow motion. 2 officers approached Daniel's borrowed cabin. Another team moved on the motel where Malahia had been staying under her sister's name. Arrest warrants in hand, they knocked once and entered. Daniel was cuffed beside an unmade sofa bed, bleary-eyed, a half-packed duffel at his feet. Across town, officers guided a trembling, robe-clad Malahia down a narrow stairwell while guests peered through room doors, phones poised to record. The charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of indignity to human remains, and 1 count of obstruction, were read in low, procedural voices. Each parent asked only one question: "Did you find them?" That same hour, RCMP divers returned to the East River, armed with new coordinates triangulated from Daniel's phone pings, the forestry drone heat map, and a recently surfaced fishing video that showed a blue tarp snagged on a root in early May. At 10:42 a.m., a diver surfaced holding a small, mud-flecked backpack, white, the purple straps bleached to a ghostly lavender. Minutes later, a second diver signaled and rose with a dinosaur print rubber boot, size 9 toddler. Recovery teams fanned out with screens and dredges. By dusk, they had retrieved a knotted length of climbing rope, 2 fleece scraps, and a plastic lunchbox containing a name sticker: Jack S. The river yielded no bodies, but Crown prosecutors no longer needed them. Forensic analysts matched epithelial cells on the rope to Lilly, mitochondrial DNA in river sediment to Jack, and blood traces on the rope's frayed end to both siblings. In the absence of remains, the court accepted the combination of biological evidence and timeline reconstruction as proof of death. First appearance was held in a packed provincial courtroom on July 11th. Reporters filled every pew, sketch artists capturing Daniel's clenched jaw, Malahia's hollow stare. The Crown argued both parents were flight risks. Bail was denied. Daniel's counsel maintained his client's innocence, pinning blame on an unstable and manipulative partner who'd spun lies to save herself. Malaya's attorney painted Daniel as a dominant, coercive force who controlled finances and moods in equal measure. The severance motion that followed split their trials, ensuring each would testify against the other. While legal machinery whirred, a new search for missing witness Shannon McInnes accelerated. Cell tower records placed her phone in a 5-kilometer radius north of Antigonish on May 16th, the day she vanished, before it went dark. Ground teams combed logging cuts without success until a Nova Scotia power lineman reported an abandoned shed near an overgrown spur road. Inside, investigators found a pile of Canada Post mail bags, a discarded postal uniform jacket, and a blood-stained seat cushion from a compact sedan. Forensic luminol lit up the plywood floor. A DNA swab confirmed the blood belonged to Shannon. A single latent fingerprint on the cushion's vinyl matched Daniel's right index finger. Prosecutors added a new charge: accessory after the fact to kidnapping. Daniel's lawyer called the evidence contaminated, circumstantial. But public opinion hardened. In August, a mural of Lilly and Jack, painted on a gas station wall, was defaced with the words, "Monsters live next door." Volunteers repainted it by nightfall, candles flickering along the curb. Autumn brought trial. A voir dire ruled the polygraph results inadmissible but allowed financial record testimony and the smartwatch sleep data. The Crown's opening traced an arc from financial desperation, CPS pressure, and substance relapse to an alleged plan: sedate the children, dispose of them, and stage a wandering off Wasif narrative that would evoke sympathy and donations. The timeline was laid out minute by minute. Jurors saw animations of phone pings, router logs, and drone imagery layered over maps. Key testimony came from Daniel's mother, Karen, granted immunity for obstruction. She admitted seeing Daniel toss heavy garbage bags into the fire pit at dawn on May 2nd, claiming he told her it was old camping gear and diapers. When she smelled burning plastic and cloth, she asked what he was doing. He replied, "Cleaning up before CPS rides our backs again." She insisted she did not look inside the bags but felt sick with dread, and later poured gasoline to make sure it was all gone. On cross-examination, she sobbed, saying she would carry the smell to my grave. Digital forensics tied knots tighter. Experts testified the rope found in the river had micro-abrasions matching Daniel's truck bed liner. Paint flakes embedded in the fibers matched the camper's fire pit grate. An analyst demonstrated how Lilly's tablet location pings overlapped Daniel's truck GPS route. Tablet inside truck until 7:28 a.m. Signal lost at Riverbank. Truck returned signal at 7:34. Jurors sat silent, faces pale in the gallery glow. Then came the coup de grace, testimony from a jailhouse informant who shared a remand cell with Daniel. The inmate claimed Daniel said, "We needed them gone, so CPS would back off and the GoFundMe would save the house." Defense attacked credibility, citing the witness's fraud convictions, but prosecutors produced a contemporaneous letter the inmate wrote to his lawyer summarizing Daniel's alleged confession, dated weeks before any reward or deal was offered. Malaya's trial unfolded in parallel, but felt more ambiguous. The Crown argued complicity. She knew the plan, did nothing to stop it, lied to cover timelines, and spent donation money. Her defense portrayed a battered woman, drugged by Daniel on May 2nd, waking to a nightmare and paralyzed by fear. Two former partners testified she had never been violent with their children. A psychiatrist told jurors she displayed complex trauma symptoms and learned helplessness. The jury deliberated 3 days, returning guilty on manslaughter and indignity to remains, not murder. Sentencing arrived in January 2026. Daniel received life without parole for 25 years on each murder count to run concurrently, plus 10 years for accessory crimes. He stared ahead, expressionless, as Justice Henshaw condemned calculated cruelty against the most vulnerable. Malaya received 12 years minus time served. She wept openly, mouthing, "I'm sorry," toward Lily's kindergarten teacher seated in the second row. Yet one piece remained: Shannon. Despite the blood evidence, her body was never recovered. In a quiet post-sentence press briefing, RCMP acknowledged the likelihood she had been killed to silence testimony. But with Daniel now imprisoned, they suspended active searches. Shannon's mother, clutching her daughter's mail carrier ID badge, vowed to continue looking as long as it takes. Community healing proved fragile. The Sullivan mobile home was demolished under court order. Wildflowers overtook the lot by summer. The riverbank where divers found the backpack became a memorial garden. Each May 2nd, volunteers gathered to release paper lanterns upstream. 2 pink, 2 blue, drifting into twilight until they wink out like storybook wishes never granted. Back in Halifax, appellate lawyers filed notices, arguing jury bias and evidentiary overreach. Legal scholars debated whether digital forensic mosaics were edging into trial by algorithm. But for most Nova Scotians, the verdicts stood firm as granite. They had asked, "Where are Lilly and Jack?" The answer arrived not as recovered bodies, but as a cautionary tale written in router logs, rope fibers, and the quiet horror of parental betrayal. In the final accounting, 5 lives were lost: Lilly and Jack, whose laughter once filled a cedar-scented yard; baby Meadow's future, now rewoven in foster care; Shannon, who tried to tell the truth; and the rural innocence of a county that learned evil sometimes presses its face against the window at dawn, wearing the familiar shape of family. Thus ends the story, a ledger of grief and small mercies, and a reminder that every missing child poster is a question demanding courage from those who dare to look beyond the trees and into the dark. Thank you for spending your time with the Witness Record. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the human shadows. Until then, stay safe, stay observant, and keep seeking the truth.